Hello. Since we are all under quarantine lockdown, I'm going to do some cooking videos. Today we're going to do some stir-fried asparagus with onion, garlic, and jalapeno. So first of all, we're going to cut our asparagus. All right, so to cut our asparagus, if you've never cut asparagus before, one of the things you need to always do is you need to cut off the stem, okay? So that's the first thing I'm going to do on all of these. I'm going to do several at a time here, is cut off the stems. And I'm kind of cutting them on an angle. And the reason that I'm cutting them on an angle is I'm going to end up cutting my pieces on a bias, which means to be cutting them on an angle. So the reason that we cut the ends of the stalks off is because these are more almost woody, and because they're a little bit more woody, that makes them difficult for us to chew. So we're going to get to the nice parts of the stalks and make it easier for us to eat these, make it easier for us to be able to chew them. All right, we've got our last ones with the ends cut off. And so now I'm going to cut these on a bias, and I'm going to put them into this bowl right here. So cutting them on a bias means that I'm going to take them, and I'm going to do just a couple at a time to make sure I get a good bias on these. I'm going to cut them at an angle. And so you can see that they are diagonal. And that's what I want to do when I'm cutting these on a bias. And keep the tops. The tops are absolutely wonderful. So you want to keep those so that you have those. They're actually my favorite part of the asparagus, is those nice tops. Notice that they're not all the same length, and that's okay. If you have all the same length, everything is uniform, and it's not necessarily exactly what you want. If you have different size pieces, the nice thing about that is that you can get different size or different amounts of vegetable in each of your bites. And so it makes every bite a little bit more interesting than the last, and it's not always the same thing. So I'm not going to worry about, neither should you, worry about making sure that they are exactly the same. So with these in the bowl. And I really want to, while we're all quarantined, do some cooking together and make sure that we are all getting some food that we can eat. And it doesn't always have to be fresh vegetables, things like that. We are going to do some cooking of different things. All right, now that I've got this, I'm going to go ahead and chop everything up. So I'm going to chop my onion. My onion is not cut exactly straight here, and that's okay. Again, I don't need it to be the same thickness all the way through because I want to have different amounts that are in my bites. So I'm going to cut these up, and I'm just going to cut them in half, and then I'm just going to cut them in slightly smaller pieces just because of being in the stir fry. You don't want the onion to be the most overwhelming part of this. So I'm going to cut it into slightly smaller pieces here. Always when you're cutting, make sure that you're keeping your fingers out of the way and you're not getting yourself cut as you go through and you do this. So again, I'm going to cut that in half and then just cut into smaller pieces. This is going to go into the second time that I go into the frying pan. I'm going to fry the asparagus a little bit up first. Now I'm going to take my jalapeno and I'm going to cut the jalapeno. And you want to cut this, you can cut it in half or you can cut it in rounds. I'm going to go ahead and I think today what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it in rounds and then I'll cut it in half. I'm cutting it fairly thin. It doesn't have to be perfectly thin. I'm cutting it fairly thin so that, again, it's not something that is overwhelming in the bite. If you are someone who doesn't like spice, that is okay. You can do a little bit less jalapeno, or you can do a smaller bite and do one of the small sweet peppers. One of the things that I want to do with this is I want to make sure that the seeds are out of it if you are someone who doesn't like spice, because the seeds are going to be the spicy part, or a spicier part. I actually like spice, and my husband likes spice, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to leave that in. And I'm going to cut these in quarters. I'm just going to stack them up a little bit. And I'm going to cut them in quarters. And that will be for the frying. So I want to make sure that as we're home, that because it's hard to go out, you can't go to restaurants anymore. And sometimes it's harder to get things delivered. I want to make sure that we all have an option for things that we can eat. All right, now that I have these done, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start frying the asparagus, and I'm going to show you how to do that. All right, so I'm going to use in this some avocado oil butter. You can use straight avocado oil as well. And I'm going to start off with 1 tablespoon in here. And I already have my pan warmed up, so it's going to melt pretty darn quickly. All right, I'm actually going to grab my asparagus, and I'm going to lay them out in an even layer, and I'll show it to you once it is laid out so you can see what that looks like. I'm going to lay it out into a nice even layer on the bottom of the pan. So at this point, I'm going to let them brown a little bit. I don't want them to overcook, but I also don't want them to be undercooked. I'm going to go ahead and cover this so it doesn't splash with this nice mesh that my husband got for me so that it doesn't splash on the wall. Okay, now that we have cut our onions and our jalapeno, I want to grab one of my asparagus. I want to make sure it's not too hot. If it's too hot, let it rest for a moment before you fry it. They're not brown, but I want to make sure that they are getting soft. All right. So this asparagus is just getting soft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to put it into a bowl. This is the original bowl that I had put it in when I was cutting it. So I'm going to grab and I'm going to take everything out. And we can see that you'll notice when you do this that the asparagus starts to change color. It actually becomes a much brighter green than it was when you originally put it in. I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to take my asparagus, and I'm actually going to pull it out this way. Okay, I'm going to let this rest off to the side, and I'm going to put another tablespoon of my olive oil butter in here, and it'll melt very quickly now that the pan is nice and hot. And into this, I am going to put my onions and my jalapeno. So I've got my onions, I've got my jalapeno, and I'm going to put them into the pan. In addition to the onion and the jalapeno, I'm going to put a teaspoon of crushed garlic in. One of the reasons I'm doing this is another way that you can do this is instead of using onion and garlic, you can actually use a shallot. And what a shallot is a basically a hybrid of onion and garlic. So if you don't have a shallot, you can always use onion, you can always use garlic, and that will work perfectly. All right, in addition to the onion and the garlic, I'm going to add some spices to this. I am going to add half a teaspoon of ground turmeric. I am going to add a full teaspoon of either brown or yellow mustard seeds. This will give it a nice, good flavor in there. I'm also going to add, if you have cumin seeds, add an entire teaspoon of cumin seeds. If you have ground cumin, which is what I have today, I'm going to add half a teaspoon of ground cumin to it. And I freshly ground some Himalayan sea salt, and I'm going to add about half a teaspoon of sea salt into it as well. All right, I'm going to come back with my spatula, and I'm going to mix this and cook it. When you're cooking it, what you're going to see is the turmeric is going to give everything a really nice and yellow color. So what we're doing is we are getting ready to have this soften up a little bit, and then we're going to add our asparagus back in. So give it about 2-3 minutes of cooking to allow the onions to soften up, to allow the jalapenos to soften up, and to really allow these flavors to mix. When your 2-3 minutes is up, add another teaspoon of oil or another teaspoon of your olive oil butter, or sorry, avocado oil butter, and mix this in. As that is melting and as that is heating up, you'll start to see the mustard seeds pop. They'll start to jump around a little bit, which is great. And then we are just going to add our asparagus back in so that we can finish with the stir fry. And now, as it's called stir frying, you want to have this consistently moving in the pan. You don't want to have it stop at any point and burn in one spot. So you're going to consistently have this moving in the pan. As you're doing this, again, you're going to start to smell the mustard seeds as they heat up. You will also start to smell, if you're using fresh cumin seeds instead of ground cumin, you will start to smell the cumin a little bit more as the seeds start to cook. And it gives it a nice, bright flavor. So this is somewhat inspired, Indian inspired or Middle East inspired with the turmeric and with the mustard seeds and cumin. Cumin is a very common, as is turmeric, a very common spice that you see in the Middle East. They're also very common spices that you see in India. So this is wonderful to get different flavors from all around the world into your cooking, since you at this point cannot leave home. So we're going to get that in there and make it nice and flavorful. All right. Everything is getting nice and cooked. I can see that my onions are starting to get, though they're yellow from the turmeric, they're starting to get a little bit translucent. The more you cook the onions, the softer the flavor will become as you cook through those. I like my onions a little bit harder and a little bit more strongly flavored. This is a personal thing. So this is up to you guys how you want to do it. All right. In less than 15 minutes, you have a nice meal. So let's put a little bit of this into a pan or a bowl so that we can see what this looks like. You can also put this, if you would like, you can put it over some rice. It would be wonderful over different types of rice, brown rice, wild rice. It would be absolutely wonderful over those. You could also put this with quinoa if you wanted to put this with quinoa. I'm going to go ahead and turn my oven off. And here is our final product. Very quick. This took us less than 10 minutes to prepare, and with the cooking took us about 15 minutes total. So enjoy and happy, healthy eating. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day. Bye now.